So we're excited to be here today. We've got lots of amazing sessions from demystifying AI to accessibility and the future of smart events. So there's a lot on the schedule to tune into. Before we begin, could we say a massive thank you to the sponsors, Stover. You'll see their big bright box just down there, so do head down and say hello to them. But also a shout out to our stage partners, Forsyth Media, Four-Ball Entertainment, Glisser, Novum, and Silent Seminars providing these headphones. For a little bit of housekeeping, I think there is also going to be closed captions on the screens on the side. There should be a QR code to scan if you need that, or you could download the Interprefy app. I feel like also there should be some oxygen masks coming down if we should fail with any oxygen in this session. And if you have any questions, please do head over to, we should have a link up on the screen, which is not, but glsr.live/ETL22. You can fire in any of your questions and our lovely panel will be able to answer them throughout the session for you. So let me welcome to the stage Vanessa Levitt, Global Director of Customer Engagement at Notified, and also Graham Forsyth, Head of Marketing at Slack. I've been using Slack for a long time, so I'm really intrigued to hear how they've been doing it and how they're delivering events all over the world. So over to you guys.
Thank you so much, Matt, and it is awesome to be here. I am going to be slightly annoying, though, Graham. Can I come and sit on the other side of you? Because there's this enormous lectern here with half our audience behind it. So actually, let's shuffle down. That's a good idea. So as Matt said, great to meet you guys. I'm Vanessa from Notified. Reasonably familiar with Event Tech Live, and it's brilliant to be back here again today in the Dome. It's quite warm in the Dome, but thank you very much for coming. And I'm pretty excited about this session because when Adam, who sets up Event Tech Live, asked me if I would interview Graham from Slack, I thought, I don't really get it, to be honest. I wouldn't have thought of Slack as the most obvious event tech contributor. But actually, the more Graham and I have talked, and we have had quite a few conversations to prepare for this, the more I realise quite how far event tech spreads now and how many different tools really make a huge difference to the overall success and delivery of our events. So Graham, you left a very thriving event tech, what I would consider a really core event tech business, started off at Slack, and you have achieved amazing things. You've just run a huge event, I understand the largest one in Europe, was it? Or a large European Slack event. And not a single email was sent in the preparation for this event. Now, I just want you guys to think about that for a moment, not sending a single email. Hands up if you have managed to organize an event without sending a single email about it. No surprise, no hands raised. So Graham, let's hear a little bit more about this. How have you leveraged Slack to help prepare and execute amazing events and communities? Was that already in existence when you started? If not, how did it come about? And if it was already in existence, who was the orchestrator of it? And how the hell do you do it without sending an email? It's a mystery to me.
I feel a little bit like we peaked very quickly there without sending an email, but it is true. So just for context, and it's great to be here today, and thank you to the Event Tech Live team for the invite, and lovely to talk to you today, Vanessa. So I joined Slack in August last year, so I can't take credit for the way that the company's using the tool to deliver our events, but obviously I've been very close to how that's happened. And to Vanessa's point, we've just run our European conference, and we'll definitely share how that went and how we leverage Slack for it. But I guess a little bit of backdrop, you will see Slack talking a lot at events like this and trying to share best practice about how Slack use Slack, because unsurprisingly, no one uses Slack better than Slack do. And as Matt was saying earlier, I've used Slack for perhaps 6-7 years prior to joining, and it wasn't until I joined the business that I was like, oh, this is how we should be using Slack. And it was a very much a light bulb moment for me as well. And going back to your point about Slack, not necessarily being the most obvious tool for an event organization or to deliver events, I think that's a fair point, because I think at the end of the day, we still have to think about Slack as a business tool. It is a tool that's there to ensure that your teams and your organizations can collaborate and get work done. And I wouldn't say it's designed just for events, but we're all businesses. We're all trying to get work done. And we, trying not to give you the sales pitch, but to give you the background, we talk about Slack as being part of the digital HQ. That's how we try and position Slack to our customers and to the organizations that we're talking to. And what we mean by that is Slack is effectively becoming the layer between the work that you need to get done and actually getting it done. So there's sort of three strands to this, and I'll try and keep it obviously within the event context, but we've all got tasks to do for any event. You know, I'm in marketing, so we're doing campaigns, we're doing events, we're running different programs, we're trying to connect with different people. You know, there's all task-based or process-based activity that we just need to do. And to do that, we're using different tools, different systems, different applications to get that done, whether you are, I mean, my favorite example with Slack is booking a day's holiday. So we all know, you know, traditionally you might have to maybe ask your team first of all if anyone else is booking that particular day off, so there isn't a clash. You might send an email out to your team to say, you know, is anyone doing anything on that day? If it's last minute, you've then perhaps got a single sign-in login somewhere to then find that application or find whatever HR system you're using. Where was the menu system again?
This is too familiar, Graham. It's too familiar.
We've all been there, right? And we all have these hundreds of these tools. With Slack, we have a command in the Slack channel, brings up Workday, so we obviously integrate with Workday. We book our day off through Slack. That immediately goes straight to my boss. She gets a Slack notification, I want that day off. She approves it in Slack, we're done. And all of that transaction happens within Workday still, but I do the work within Slack. And that's really where this concept, and it is kind of a marketing concept around the digital HQ comes to life, because essentially we're trying to simplify a lot of those processes and a lot of that sort of manual activity that happens. And people do think about Slack as being kind of another chat tool, another channel of, let's say, noise and communication that's happening, but that's a small component of it. You know, it is about using, we're not telling you to get rid of all the systems and solutions you have, because you need them. We've got hundreds of pieces of tech here. These are all super valuable to whatever you're delivering and however you're delivering your event. But you don't necessarily want to keep jumping constantly from tool to tool, from email perhaps into WhatsApp to some other channel. We're trying to bring all of that together to make your life easier and to make those processes and that work happen in a less kind of, you know, frictionless kind of way. I guess bringing it back to your question, hopefully that kind of sets the scene a little bit around Slack. When it comes to events, you know, there's sort of three strands I'm going to try and stick to, because honestly I could talk for hours about what we do. But I think first is how we set up our channels to ensure we're communicating with the right people at the right time. The second one is, again, going back to those integrations with other tools to get that work done quicker. And actually I'll talk about the channels piece first, because I think that's probably the most important. And you know, using Frontiers, which was our European event recently, you know, the first thing our events team do is to set up those channels. And what those channels are doing is to make sure that the right teams are in the right space for their project kickoff. So that could be the creative team who are perhaps doing branding for the event. It could be the logistics, you know, the organisers themselves who want their own space to communicate. I was heavily involved in kind of the digital marketing side, so we have a kind of demand gen channel, which is talking very much around, you know, our audience acquisition. There's a lot of channels, so immediately, you know, I can sense everyone goes, well, that's a lot to manage. Well, then you change your navigation. You know, immediately the first thing we all do is to customize our navigation, so all of the channels we care about are right at the top of Slack, and we see them first thing. We know where those notifications are. So constantly people are adapting Slack to work for them as well, and I think that's really important, because businesses are using Slack in completely different ways. Like, the use cases are so different if you are an event organizer to a financial organization to a retailer. You know, they are adapting and working with Slack in very different ways. But the beauty of these channels is that it isn't just about your teams and the organizations within your four walls. You know, you're all working with agencies and suppliers and different vendors, and we now, when we're running our events, are bringing those people into those Slack channels as well. So whether it's our event agency who are managing venue logistics, or whether it is design agencies who are supporting our creative teams, they come into those Slack channels as well. So they're part of that conversation. And to your point, we don't send emails. There's no need for Slack to send emails to each other.
Yeah.
Yes, you might get a notification from a calendar invite, or someone shares you a Google Doc. That's it.
And
there's no communication happening.
The
with
supplier point, I think, is really interesting because, as you said, events are incredibly supplier-rich activities, constant external input coming into them. Do suppliers behave when you're first trying to get them to involve themselves in the event in the Slack way, or does it take a little bit of nurturing and cajoling and encouragement?
It's a good question. I don't think it takes encouragement, because I think people very quickly... I think
It's
if you're a
easy to use.
supplier, it's easy to use. Yeah, it's very simple to get in there. It does take time to work out how do I get Slack to work best for me. I think that's the challenge, and perhaps it took me a few weeks to sort of think about how do I set this up so it suits me when I first joined. And it's worth taking that time. And I think even once every couple of months, I will go through my Slack channels and just clear out all the stuff I don't need to be in. You know when you're in WhatsApp and someone's left a group and it's like that, someone's left the group. You can leave a Slack channel. It's absolutely fine. And that's a really interesting point, because culturally, that's where we encourage people to use Slack in a very kind of normal way. Like if you want to leave a group, it's fine. I think great examples are, we don't need to say thank you for everything. In an email chain, for example, someone completes a project and everyone piles in going, thanks, you did such a great job, thanks. It's lovely. I'm not saying you shouldn't say that, let's be polite. But suddenly your inbox is full of all these replies that perhaps you don't need. In a Slack channel, you get a thumbs up.
Yeah.
You get a fire emoji. You get a mini fist pump animation. You're done. And actually, I'm being slightly flippant, I guess, but from a task management point of view, culturally, we do that as well. So if I send a request to one of my colleagues saying, hey, can you help me with a certain report? Once they see it, they will put the eyes emoji on it. So I know that they've seen it. I don't need a reply saying, hey, Graham, I've seen it. I'll come back to you at some point. I know that they've got it. And I know if I need to chase them at some point, that's fine. But they've acknowledged it. When a task is completed, they will just do a tick emoji. I'm not going to get a big explanation about, hey, I've done it for you, just to let you know it's now in your inbox. Tick, it's done. And that's really where, that's where Slack can come to life, and that's where, we're bringing our vendors and our suppliers and agencies in there, and they very quickly get that, and they very quickly become culturally part of how we operate a little bit as well.
And I think my other question around the multi-channels that you mentioned, so at the start of an event, set up multiple channels for different groups. Are they quite open, or are they sort of invite-only channels? Can someone easily get in and out of them, or not?
So the policy within Slack is that everything is public. So the only time there would be a private channel is if it's perhaps finance-based or HR or some sort of policy or something like that. Everything by default is public. And there's actually a few reasons for that. One is if you make it private, you then can't make it public afterwards. There's a reason why you've made it private. But also it allows people to come into those conversations as well. If you think about an office space, often people will go, we're going to have a meeting and we're going to shut that door and it's just us. And then you're like, well, I wish Bob was here.
Yeah.
And suddenly Bob's not there. And someone's on PTO and, someone's taking their dog for a walk or whatever. You never get everyone together at the same time. And you think about channels in that way. We're keeping that door open for people to come in. If I want to find out what's happening with one of our customers, I will go into that customer Slack channel and have a look. And I've got the entire history from when that channel was first set up. And we keep those open. So I can go back to events from 3-4 years ago. And as a new joiner, that was amazing to be able to join that business, go back and go, well, how did they do Frontiers in 2019?
Yeah, the archives, effectively.
Yeah, and I go back and I look at everything. And we do that
all in one place. I think that for me is the differentiator.
Yeah, all of the different people and the teams that were involved in there. How did that, who in legal signed that off? Who in finance was a blocker? Let's not say that. And you've got that rich history, and that is, the kind of the nucleus of what Slack's about is that knowledge sharing and making sure that people have got access to all of that rich information. So yeah, keep things open, unless you really need to keep it private. But
yeah, I like that. For me, openness is definitely the way forward. I think for most event profs it probably is. Just quickly want to make sure you guys know you can send questions via Glisser. So I think the website was glsr.live/ETL22. If you want any help with that, just put up your hand and I'm sure someone will come and help you get in. So just on your phone, you can send questions in and we'll try and answer them as we go along, actually, as opposed to just leaving them all until the end. Let's get to Frontiers in a bit more detail. So what were the goals of that event? And the reason I'm asking you is because I want to know how Slack helped you achieve those event goals. So sort of the headlines, what were you trying to achieve? And then how did Slack help that happen?
Yeah, so obviously I'm in marketing, and these events are there to drive, revenue and pipeline for our organisation. So the goals are very much around with these events. We were at the brewery. It was 800 attendees, so not thousands of people. The goal was the right people. It wasn't about filling the room, getting bombs on seats. It was about we need to make sure that the right people are there. So ensuring that we're communicating the objectives of that event, the strategy behind that event, the thinking of that event to all of the players within our organisation who have a responsibility to drive that audience is critical. So our sales teams, our customer success teams, our execs, making sure that they understand right from day one, why are we doing this event? What does success look like, and how are we going to drive that? That's crucial. And yes, you could send an email to do that, but actually, we all know that events are constantly kind of evolving activities. So as speakers come on board, why is that speaker important to the audience that we're trying to get? And we would set up specific channels just with our sales organisation. That's actually one that I was running to make sure that, on a daily basis they were getting updates from, who's registered, what's the latest news. And it isn't just all text-based. We use, there's a new functionality called Clips, where I can do very quick kind of video recordings and share that out with the teams, very similar to kind of Zoom, but within that Slack channel, so that's there, that's archived. People can watch it whenever it suits them, and they can go back to it when they need to. We're integrating, within Google Docs and within our CRM systems to pull reports across so that people can, they've got that information around perhaps accounts that have signed up or whatever it might be. They're not, again, switching to different tools to find out, well, what does that mean to my kind of book of business? So keeping that constant feedback loop is really important. And again, getting that feedback from the teams from the other side as well. So can we get a show of hands for anyone that actually uses? Have we got Slack users at all?
About half.
Has any, keep your hands in the air if you've ever created your own workflow. Slowly. Well done. One? Okay. 2. So very simple, put a feedback workflow in that channel. Has anyone got any feedback on the event at the moment? Now, yes, they can send me a message.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yes.
Could you actually explain more what you mean by workflow? Because those who aren't Slack users, that it might actually not mean anything. And even those who are Slack users because I have been in the past, but I never created a workflow. And I think just total clarity on what you mean by that could be really useful for everyone to have.
Yeah, so a workflow is really a very simple tool to get something done. I made that sound really simple. So for example, and it just be clear, it sounds very techy and very kind of geeky. There's no coding involved. It's very much kind of following instructions that Slack give you. And you can build a workflow so that people can feed back information to you through that channel. So literally in that channel, touch of a button, a pop-up will come up asking you, what's your feedback on the event, or what would you like to see, or whatever it may be, or a poll might be popping up in there, or the use cases are
plentiful,
literally endless. You can pull information from spreadsheets across to bring things in. You can feed information back into spreadsheets. So whatever it might be, the use cases are kind of endless. But again, it's just that simple way of enabling your teams and the people that you're working with to give you that feedback. Obviously there's hundreds of different ways that you can collect feedback. You can just do a Google form and send them the link. But again, we want to keep that information in that channel so that everyone knows and everyone's comfortable that that's the one place where I need to go. If I am an account manager, I've got a lot of different challenges, I've got a lot of different customers, different demands, and an event is just one part of that. And we need to recognize that. So when we say, here's the latest update on that event, we want them to know that they go to this one channel. That's where all the information from Graham is. That's where I get that update. And if I want to feed something back to him, that's where I'm going to go as well. So we keep their life really simple.
Yeah.
So I think that's, the communication aspect of that and the flow of information around that event was critical to making sure that everyone was aligned to those goals. Everyone knew what the objective was, what the strategy was, and everyone was very clear.
Yeah, I think that getting information back from the team as well as putting information out is so vital, and that, I guess, is what those workflows really help to increase the engagement on.
Yeah, and I think it's no different to if you were in an office. You know, Slack are not saying let's close down all our offices and do everything online. You know, what we're saying is this is the digital version of your office in a way. You know, you can bring all of your teams together and have a meeting. That's absolutely fine. You know, we've now brought in a new tool called Huddles, which allows people to gather within that channel.
Yeah.
You can open up a huddle really quickly. People can drop in and out as if you were having a kind of whiteboarding discussion session.
I used to love a huddle, I have to say. Just the convenience of it. No longer a Slack user, but just easy. Just flick a toggle and you're having a chat with someone.
Yeah, and it was designed to be that kind of like, hey, let's grab a coffee and have a quick chat. You know, that equivalent of like, let's jump on a huddle. I still find it a little awkward to say let's have a huddle. It's the British.
There has actually been one question come through around workflows. It's a little bit commercial, but I think we should address it now. Is that workflow feature available to all users or all plans, or is it?
It would be on a paid plan.
On a paid plan. Cool. Thank you. And we're going to come back to there's another question come through about sustainability, but I think we'll hold that one for a little bit. You're really giving the impression that Slack is, unsurprisingly, as Team Slack, integral to everything that you do. But obviously, we're always looking to grow our abilities, stretch ourselves, achieve greater and better results next time. So next time you guys are planning a major event, what are you hoping to use Slack for in the future that perhaps you haven't done yet that you think it can really help to up the ante again?
Yeah, and I think the one thing I would say about Slack is that it is constantly evolving. You know, as we use Slack, we're learning more things that we can do. So I think this point is really valid, Vanessa, in that we will think differently about how we set things up next time and how we deliver our events through Slack, because we are constantly kind of iterating on how we work with the tool. I think going back to last year, a lot of the Slack events were virtual, so the tool became integral to kind of the way those events were run. So, Frontiers, when I first joined, we set up a workspace for the event with Slack channels in there, which was an amazingly kind of vibrant space. And, lots of conversations happening digitally because the event was virtual itself. There was a lot of thought, I can't take any credit here, but there was a lot of thought about how those channels were set up. So some of them were set up kind of persona-based, so channels specifically for engineers or IT professionals or HR sales, whatever it might be. There was vertical channels set up for by industry, so if you were in financial services or retail or whatever it might be. There was the let's say the more light-hearted, fun channels. So I know we discussed previously, we had a yelling channel where you could just go in, type whatever you want, but you had to do it in caps, which sounds insane, but was the most satisfying thing you can possibly do, just shouting digitally.
Are there any particular yell messages that you recall from it?
I don't. I think I was so new to the business then, I was just like, this is just amazing. But the one thing I would then say is that it's not just a case of, okay, you build it and they come. We had community managers, and I actually managed one of the industry channels for a kind of afternoon session. Everyone went in pre-planned. The community managers for those channels had questions they want to pose to the audience. They had polling questions pre-prepared. They knew what the sessions were coming up, and they were there to make sure that conversation started. Some people would obviously go into the channels and freely just start chatting. Other people are kind of, in the social media world, they're kind of lurkers that just want to hear what's being said and discussed. But, there was a lot of preparation around, these channels are there, but we need to encourage people to use them, and it worked really well. This year, we didn't, certainly for Frontiers Europe, we actually took that away. We wanted the in-person experience to be more at the forefront and not necessarily have the digital channels to, I don't want to say distraction, but another space to you feel like you have to navigate as well. So next year, we'll start looking at that balance. How do we give people that balance of the digital space for communication and perhaps for connecting and networking, plus also the live experience. So I think you probably all know this better than me, but iterating on those events is something we're doing in the same way that everyone else is.
Yeah, and getting that balance right is something that probably every single person in this room, if you could call this room hall, better word, is also trying to work out what's right for either them and their own events or for their customers and the events that they're trying to support. So we're all on a journey in that regard. And this is segueing quite nicely into community, which was the second half of the conversation that we wanted to have today, around how you are leveraging Slack to facilitate communities around these events. And I think the most important thing I'd like to ask you to do first is, from a Slack perspective, what do you mean by community in this sense? Because I think one of the things the event sector struggles with a little bit is many different varieties of what community actually means. So we've got perspective from Slack. What's it for you guys?
Yeah, our community is our users.
Mm-hmm.
So it's those people that are in Slack on a kind of day-to-day basis that are let's say the knowledge owners of how Slack operates within their organisation. So I think our user group community is just over 20,000 people. So they have there's a forum where they can join and discuss challenges, share knowledge, ask questions. Very much that kind of peer-to-peer
support. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, managed by Slack community managers, but we think about it very much as our kind of power. Let's say power users. It's probably the best expression.
Great.
Our events are probably quite different. Our events are designed to be more of that kind of strategic, forward-looking, where are your businesses trying to get to, and how can Slack enable you to get there? Less about what does this button do, and how do I link that to that, and all the kind of techie stuff, which you need to know on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's where the user group and having that platform for them to go and ask those questions when they need an answer is important, and then the events become more of a strategy, forward-thinking, play more of a business role. Great.
I wanted to ask a few more questions about the community, but a question has come through that feels very pertinent, seeing as you just casually mentioned there's about 20,000 users in the community channels that you have. With so many channels, be that the community channels or perhaps the internal channels when you're preparing for an event, who's responsible for managing them? So this is a question from the audience. How does somebody take ownership to make sure, the question is, it doesn't just get polluted with too much noise?
In terms of, let's bring it back to the event. So in terms of Frontiers, we had two kind of key sort of event managers, and they took the initial responsibility in terms of setting up those channels. I don't think we really monitor it in a way of there being too much. I don't know how there can be too much noise, because if you're using that channel to ask questions, unless you're suddenly saying, "Hey guys, how was your weekend?" and off you go, like we're not using it in that way. So I can't think of an example where I've been in a channel and gone, what are they talking about? Like it's, that channel is set up to be that conversation point around whatever that task, topic, or whatever's happening within that piece of the event. We have social channels, like we have team channels. We've got our marketing team channels. There's more, let's say, day-to-day conversation happening in those, but I don't think one person takes responsibility. So yes, we will have set channels set up at the beginning of the event, which are the core ones, but they will, they can break off. Like it's fine if someone decides actually there's a really important conversation that needs to be had around the executive track experience. Set up a channel, like take ownership, like that's fine. There's no problem. That channel doesn't need to stay there forever. You can archive that away. It can be there for a couple of weeks. If that's important and you need to bring the right people in there, set it up. Don't need to go and ask permission. Like that's not what this is about. Like in the same way that you might set up your own meeting. I really think we need to talk about X. Let's go and have a conversation about it. You're just having a conversation in Slack.
Two things I'll add on to that. I think firstly, if the channels feel like noise, I'd probably want it to, this is going to sound like I'm doing 1-on-1 and getting to 10, but I'd probably have a think about the culture within my organisation actually, because if it was the right sorts of conversations happening in there, but it was being perceived as noise, I would be wondering why the right conversations weren't resonating in the right way. But then the second thing I will just add in is just from personal experience of using Slack in the past, people do get it wrong sometimes. But the sort of open, collaborative environment that Slack is always made it incredibly easy to say, oh, wrong channel, or actually that's better off Slack, or just being direct with folks about it. So you tell them, help them understand how to do it better next time, and then they do it better next time. And we've never had any issue with that previously.
And I think that goes back to what we were talking about, the culture. Like, people will self-police. To your point,
Yeah.
you know, if you start having as you go back to the event environment, you've gone in the wrong channel, you're suddenly asking about, why hasn't this invoice been signed off for the caterers? Wrong channel, it's in that one.
Yeah.
You done?
Yeah.
Off you go.
Really simple. And then when it is in the right channel, it's not noise. I think that's the crucial bit to it. So back to the community. You said 20,000, which I picked up on, because that's quite sizable. But does it actually matter how many people are in your community?
No, I think it's down to whatever that community is designed to be there for.
Yeah.
Community, my perception is community is quite a scary word. I think we think about it as being, often it's like, how do we build this community? Well, arguably your community, it's just an audience of people. You've all got audiences, you've all got customers or people that are coming to your events. They're your community. They're probably already there, unless you're starting a business from scratch. And then you're building a business because you know there's an audience that has a demand for something. So I think, and actually outside of Slack, in a previous role, I worked with a number of organisations who were building communities, and the likes of BT and Spotify, and I was lucky to speak to those and sort of understand what their strategy around community was. And it was all about, well, is there an audience that wants this? Or are we doing something because our business is demanding it? And then if you're doing it because your business is demanding it, what's the value of people coming to it? So I think that there's always a need for a community that starts that off. And I think the strategy around what that community is there to do is absolutely critical. That's where communities can go wrong. So I wasn't there, obviously, when the Slack user group community started, but I would second guess that there was a core group that probably got together at some point. Perhaps they organised their own meetups or something, and then it was like, actually, this is quite a vibrant thing that's happening. People are doing this off their own back. Let's give them a space where they can continue that conversation outside of those user group events. See what happens. If we've got a core group, that will grow. I remember a few years ago I actually interviewed the CEO of Mumsnet at an event, and I'm sure everyone's kind of touched on Mumsnet in some way, by mistake or by design. And she was talking about how she set that up in her bedroom as a forum. This is one of the biggest communities in the world. But there's a need there. There's a need for a space for mums originally to go and ask advice, seek help, comfort, reassurance, whatever it was. She recognised there was a need there, put that together, and then organically that grows. And I think there's 101 use cases around that and how community can work. I remember talking to Spotify a few years ago, who the vibrancy of their community isn't down to what Spotify are doing, but how they enable what they call rock stars. So kind of ambassadors within that community that are there to amplify new music that's coming out, share new ideas, and they actually use it also from a technical point of view to ask that audience, what would you love to see from Spotify? What can we do? And there's a real two-way kind of communication there. So, I think communities are there to support whoever that audience is. Community. We should probably scrap the word community maybe and just talk about audiences, but maybe it's too late for that. But and then also it does allow people to get closer to that brand as well, in what I would argue is probably more of a safer space. Yeah,
I think in the event world, you're absolutely right. Community audiences translates very nicely in most cases. Outside the events world, the word community is probably a little bit more relevant, where they're not necessarily talking about audiences on a daily basis. But having seen what you've seen work so well at Slack, is there anything that you would recommend if you're an event professional just starting out, launching a community, or in the very early stages? Any couple of top tips you might share?
Go and talk to your community.
Yeah.
What do they want?
Just
what do
ask
they want
them.
From you? Go and ask them. They'll soon tell you if they want some sort of another digital platform or forum or something to join. But I think you probably know as well, like if you're seeing this core nucleus of people consistently coming to events or engaging around certain topics or ideas, whatever it is, then there's probably a space where they want to keep that conversation going. This is where, again, I used to work in social media. This is where the rise of LinkedIn and Facebook, Twitter all happened, because like-minded people were able to get together and have a conversation. It's kind of spiraled into something arguably a bit different now, but that the core objective around what a community is exactly the same. People coming together around a common thread or a common issue, or whether it's work, life, whatever it is. But we've seen that it's just about understanding whether that audience needs it. I remember going back sort of maybe 12, 15 years ago when all of the football teams went, we need forums. The fans need a forum where they can chat about, no they don't, they're going to the pub after the match. That's where they're having the conversations about what's happening.
Yeah.
TV shows started doing it. The sort of X Factors and the reality shows were like, we need a forum where people can carry on that conversation. They didn't want it.
Yeah.
They're having conversations with their friends and with people in the office on a Monday morning and stuff like that. So was there a need for it?
Yeah.
No.
So you've got to do it for them, not for yourself, in a nutshell. All right. We have 6 minutes left. We've got a few questions from the audience. A couple of them are going to take us straight back into Slack and actually a little bit more of the technical side of it. So I'm going to start with one which is a little bit softer. Do you think the use of Slack can work internally for a single team without organisation-wide adoption? I also have an opinion on this from past experience, but I'd love to hear yours.
Yes, and actually it's kind of the classic Slack use case. So within the let's say the corporate world, the engineers, developers, IT organizations, they're the ones that understand Slack the best. So we see this quite a lot, that they will adopt very quickly. They understand how to build workflows. They understand how to integrate it with the tools they already have. They understand how they can get work done really quickly and really efficiently. And often we'll see that other departments then like, how are you doing X, Y, Z? Can we do that? And then Slack will kind of organically grow within an organization. Others take it on kind of wall to wall and they kind of roll it out for their entire organization. But it's not unusual for teams and departments to pick up on Slack very quickly, and then it kind of expands out.
Yeah, that was the first way I started using Slack, was elite breakaway group, I think we may have called ourselves, to try and facilitate better sharing. And I think there were maybe in total 20 of us within around about a 250 person organization. And it was really transformational, actually. And then, as you said, a couple of people were like, oh, what are you doing? What are you doing? And I had left before I saw what happened there, but it did work. So whoever that question was from, it was absolutely beneficial to that particular group.
That's a good question.
You mentioned integrations there, and that very often engineers, developers may be quite quick on those. I've certainly seen these being tremendously beneficial in the past. But with the event planning specifically in mind, and I'm actually going to chuck communities in there as well in case that's relevant to this question, what app integrations have you found most relevant?
I mean, I have to be perfectly honest, I haven't done a ton of that. I have used, we use Splash as a simple kind of landing page and registration system for some of our kind of smaller events, and we can integrate that into Slack. So a very simple example, we did a networking event a few weeks ago, and as people checked into the event, we had a dedicated Slack channel for that so that our teams could see who checked in. So they had one channel, they just kept that open on their phones and they could see as people checked in who was there. Wouldn't recommend it for like a 10,000 person conference and you've just got floods of names coming through, but if it's a small kind of event and it gives people a heads up of like, Vanessa's just entered the building, then that's a nice little way for the teams to know, okay, they're here, I'm going to go and seek them out. I mean, the integrations, I think it's something like nearly 2,500 different tools integrate with Slack, and I'm sure, I would go and chat with, there's definitely people here that I know integrate with Slack, I don't know them all. But I think it's, when we say event planning, I would actually look outside of the event tech. No offense to the guys here, but your Asanas, for example. Is anyone using kind of project management tools like Asana, or I can't think of other examples? Trello, exactly. Yeah. They all integrate. So we use Asana for quite a lot of just the general project management of events, and that integrates into Slack. So as tasks are completed, or you're setting up a new task, you can actually do that through Slack rather than going into the Trello or Asana platform. So again, it just stops that constant hopping between different solutions, which just makes your life quicker and easier. So, and then also I think just the fundamental tools that you have in your business to operate, your HR systems, your finance systems, bringing those into it, that's the bit that on a day-to-day basis, is kind of game-changing. To have access to those tools within the Slack platform, to get that stuff done is hugely valuable, and that's where this, the concept of this digital HQ kind of comes to life. But I think that the opportunity for integrations is enormous, and a huge component of what makes Slack, this vibrant tool.
So a couple more questions, both of which might be slightly harder to answer. Sustainability. Do you guys have any data on this and the use of Slack instead of alternative communications?
I think there is. Honestly, I would have to go and dig that up. I think there is. I would Google it. I think there is definitely information about the better use of Slack and how that can advance sustainability within your organisation. I think just in general, just from a travel point of view, a time point of view, it is quicker, it's more efficient. So I think there is data around that. I don't have it off the top of my head, to be honest, but I think it's a valuable point, and yes, I think there is a huge benefit to that.
Yeah, something I noticed when looking through the attendees here was there are more sustainability people here, I think, than there have been in previous years. So I think that's why more of us are starting to ask these sorts of questions, and these are absolutely brilliant questions we should all be asking and starting, I guess, to become more familiar with. Now, this last question, this is a spicy question. Whoever sent this in, I doff my cap to you for just being ballsy and putting it out there. So Discord is another community-style communication platform. So I'm going to diplomatically take Discord specifically out of the question and perhaps just go with competitors in general. How is Slack remaining competitively advantaged in the future, and what do you think is going to be the secret sauce going forwards that will keep you ahead of the competitors?
There's always competitors.
Well, they're good, right? Competitors make you better, is how I always think of it.
It'd be a boring industry to be in if there wasn't competition. The reason I joined Slack is because I've never worked with a more important tool. So that was the reason I joined. I genuinely, and this isn't me, I'm wearing Slack socks today, but I take my Slack hat off. I don't think there's a more important tool that organisations can have at this moment in time. Just thinking about the kind of disruption we've had and continue to have, economically at the moment, but the disruption we've had from a work standpoint over the last couple of years, and people not being in offices and working from home, and now the increased need for flexibility and the demands that people have for flexibility. Slack has always been able to enable that cultural shift, but we're seeing now that employees are now demanding more of that. They need these kind of tools to make sure that they can get their work done better. So I'm not sidestepping the question, but I honestly don't think there's a tool out there that's really doing what Slack's doing. And we can see today there's 101 tools. Use whatever tool works for you. Use whatever is best for whatever it is you're trying to do, whether that's to build a certain community, whether that is to whatever it might be. How does that all integrate together? Are you bringing a tool in because you need that tool now? What's it going to do in the future? Are you going to renew that in a year? How do you bring it into your business and really embed it? And I think that's where Slack can be powerful. How you can embed those important tools to you within your organisation. I'm not sure there's too many other tools that do that.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the end of the session. Graham, thank you so much. I think you've been very generous with your answers and enlightening at times, and I'm thinking about what I should be yelling in capitals before the end of the day. Everyone, please put your hands together for Graham Forsyth from Slack.
Vanessa, Graham, thank you so much. I have one more question. Slack socks, are they real? Are they actual Slack socks?
I mean, it's not painted on.
Well,
I-
yeah.
I-
No, they are.
think-
It is the most in-demand.
There would be a
piece of
stampede,
thing.
stampede for those if they were
Okay,
available.
Brilliant.
Send me an email.
Guys, thank you so much. It was fascinating discussion. And thank you everyone for some really good questions coming in today as well. Just to let you know that 11 o'clock, we've got next attendee trends and the future of events. So hopefully a lively panel about the trends for what's next for events. So one more time, Graham and Vanessa, thank you so much.